Hello, and welcome back to our channel. My name is Ashley Morgan, and I'm an attorney here at Ashley F. Morgan Law PC. One of the great things about my job is I get to help people manage their debt. And in managing their debt, one of the important tools we have is bankruptcy. The idea of bankruptcy scares a lot of people, but there's a lot of myths out there. And so I have 6 of the top bankruptcy myths that I hear on a regular basis. And I'm going to go through and explain why they really aren't true. Biggest myth that I hear is most people don't want to consider bankruptcy because it's going to ruin their credit score. But in reality, bankruptcy helps most of my clients. Bankruptcy gets rid of all your past due payments, so if you're at least 90 days to 180 days past due on payments, you're probably going to see a big improvement with bankruptcy. Additionally, bankruptcy isn't something that ruins your credit for life. You have to realize bankruptcy wipes away any of the old negative things that are on your credit, and it allows you to start rebuilding. A lot of my clients see between like a 620 and a 670 after bankruptcy, and from there it's just a starting point. We see them improve by using tips and tricks that we advise our clients after they file. Another thing that people worry about is, they'll never be able to buy a house, never be able to buy a car, never be able to get another credit card. That is the farthest thing from the truth. You'll be getting new credit card offers and new car offers immediately after you file bankruptcy. And a lot of those interest rates are on the higher side, but if you go to your local credit union or you wait about a year and you work on your credit during that year, a lot of those rates are going to be back down to the low normal rates most people get if you have decent credit. Additionally, most people are afraid they're never going to be able to buy a house again after bankruptcy. That is not true at all. After Chapter 7, there is a 2-year waiting period for buying a house under an FHA program. After Chapter 13, it's a year. I have plenty of my clients who file Chapter 7 call me up after 2 years saying, "Hey, Ashley, I need my discharge. I need a copy of my petition. The underwriters want it before we close on our house." Get them those documents, and I hear great stories 6 months later about how someone's bought a new house. So it's not a death sentence. It actually helps a lot of people. And, credit, you rebound pretty quickly. So there's really not too much to be concerned about when it comes to credit scores in bankruptcy. The second biggest myth that I usually hear is that you're going to lose your house in bankruptcy. Well, there is some truth in this. It really depends on what chapter you're filing and what your situation is. Now, there are certain protections in a bankruptcy. If you're filing a Chapter 7, you're wiping away your debt, but you still get to keep certain things. A car is usually one of those things. You're allowed to keep a certain amount of equity in your car, depending on what exemptions or protections the court allows you to use. Here in Virginia, we have a $6,000 exemption, and this is $6,000 for any equity in a car. So if you have a car that's worth $20,000, but you have $15,000 in a loan on it, you're still going to be allowed to keep it because there's only about $5,000 worth of equity. This protection also usually is looking at auction prices on a car, not, your normal, I'm going to go to a dealership and get a price for that. So there is some flexibility. So most of my clients don't have trouble keeping a car. Now, when it comes to a house, Virginia doesn't have very good exemptions for that. There are a few exceptions. If there's a married couple without joint debt, we can talk about attempts by the entirety exception. But besides that, we're looking at a maximum $5,000 exemption for any property that you own. If that's a concern and you have more equity than that, we can talk about a Chapter 13. In a Chapter 13, you're allowed to keep all your assets, but you're paying out the equity in those assets over the course of a 3 to 5 year plan. So there are options for people who have assets and want to keep them through bankruptcy. It's not always here, you got to give it all up. Another big misconception I hear about bankruptcy is that, I owe all this tax debt and I can't do anything with it. There is some truth in that because some taxes aren't dischargeable. Things like trust fund taxes, such as taxes that you get from running a business and you're supposed to be withholding from paychecks, those don't go away. But if you have regular income taxes, they are at least 3 years old, they were filed at least 2 years ago, and they've been assessed about 6 months or more ago, you might be able to get them discharged. It's a very specific rule that you have to go over with your attorney. But if they are older taxes, you do have a chance, and bankruptcy can help you get those to go away. If they aren't able to be discharged, you still have an option with Chapter 13 to help you structure a payment plan. Additionally, there are other ways to work with the IRS, but if you have significant other debts, often you want to look at bankruptcy and to handle both your tax and your non-tax debt. The fourth myth that I tend to hear a lot about is that you can't have money in your retirement account. You can't have money saved away. that is probably the biggest myth and the biggest fear that I have for most of my clients, that they listen to that. In Virginia, there is an unlimited exception for people who have money in qualified retirement funds. These include 401ks, IRAs, TSP plans. So you could have a significant amount of money in those accounts and creditors can't touch them. Additionally, that means when you go into bankruptcy, you get to keep all of that money. So one of the worst things I ever see is people liquidating their TSP plan, liquidating their 401k to pay debts, and then they come see me. Really, if you have a lot of debt and you're considering doing that, you really want to talk to a bankruptcy attorney before that. We have, no fee consultations to go over your situation and to go over the pros and cons. Sometimes maybe a 401k loan is the best option for you. Sometimes it's not. But, you want to know all the options out there before you start taking that money and before you start either creating other tax consequences or putting yourself in a payment plan for the next few years. The fifth biggest myth that I have is one of the ones that keep a lot of people from coming into my office. I get someone who comes in and says, hey, I want to file bankruptcy, but my wife doesn't. And that is far from the truth. If you're married, you do not have to file with your partner. It is very common for you to file with your partner, and it's always a lot easier if both of you have debts for both of you to file, but you don't have to. The bankruptcy court understands sometimes one spouse has a lot of debts and the other doesn't. The court will look at your joint income because they're looking at household income and household expenses. However, when it comes to filing, one spouse or both spouses can file. So that's something you often want to talk to your bankruptcy attorney about, figure out if there's a reason for both of you to file, or sometimes there's actually a reason to keep one of you out of bankruptcy, even if the other one has debt. And, sometimes it's a tool we use. So you really need to review your situation, understand what's going on, and see what option is going to give you the best outcome. Now, the final myth that I often hear is that you make too much money to qualify for bankruptcy. And while, there are income limits for how much you can file, that is one of the reasons we have a Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. For Chapter 7, we do look at your income. If you are below the median income from your state, you qualify for Chapter 7 automatically. If you're above that median, it does not mean automatically you do not qualify. What we have to do is called the means test. This means test looks at your income for your household size, and certain expenses. Some expenses, like utilities, rent, are things that the court says you should be spending a certain amount depending on where you live. Other things, like your mortgage, your car payment, your taxes, the court takes your actual amount that you're being spent. So depending on your situation, you may or may not qualify. I've had plenty of clients at the same income level, but because their situations are so different, one qualifies and the other doesn't. And this isn't something and most attorneys, unless, it's a clear case that you have a really high mortgage or you have such high non-dischargeable tax debt that we can tell right away that you're going to qualify. A lot of times it requires what we call running numbers, looking at your situation, looking at those paychecks, and going over to see if you do qualify or you do not. But basically, just because you make a lot of money doesn't mean you don't qualify for bankruptcy. And additionally, if you don't qualify for Chapter 7, we can still talk to you about a Chapter 13. Chapter 13s aren't as quick. They are a repayment plan, but they do still help you manage your debt, and they do help you have a light at the end of the tunnel. After Chapter 13 plan, most debts go away. There are limitations, and you can talk to your bankruptcy attorney about that, but you have sort of a fresh start after your 3 to 5 year plan. So really, if you are struggling with debt or you're not sure how you're going to manage your debt, bankruptcy should be something you're considering. It's not the right fit for everyone, and it's not something that everyone can file. But it is a tool, and it's a tool that a lot of people could benefit from if you are really struggling month to month. If you have any questions, or you're in the Northern Virginia area and you're considering bankruptcy, or you're at least considering knowing about bankruptcy so you know it as a possible option, even if it's down the road, feel free to give our office a call, 703-880-4881. I'm happy to sit down with you, go over your situation, go over the pros and cons, and figure out if bankruptcy is even something you should be considering.